U.S. forces have shot down 4 aerial objects over North American skies this month, leading to growing concern in Washington. One senator even described the past few weeks as nothing short of craziness. But there are many unanswered questions. Let's talk about this series of events happening in the Americas and who is spying what. Jamil Jaffer is the founder of the National Security Institute, GMU Scalia Law School, and is now joining us from Washington, D.C. Jamil, good to see you and welcome to WION.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
It started with a balloon, and now 3 other objects have been spotted in United States and Canadian airspaces. China initially denied that it was used for spying, saying it was a weather monitoring device that was blown astray. If it is not spying, then what could it be?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that it is spying. The U.S. government has explicitly made clear that it's their view that it is a surveillance balloon, that what the Chinese are saying is not true, and that it was designed to obtain signals intelligence, essentially radio and other frequency collection with the antennas built into that balloon. And so that's what the U.S. government has said. The Chinese maintain the story that it was a weather balloon, as you say, gone astray. But at this point, it's now been shot down, and the U.S. government has recovered a significant amount of material and are currently investigating it at the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia.
Jamil, this has been recurring for a month now. Why do you think this is coming to the forefront right now or happening at this moment?
Well, you know, at a minimum, this first balloon was detected recently, so that's part of what's going on here. It now appears that the U.S. government, and in particular the North American Aerospace Defense Command, has modified the way they're looking and using their radar to identify these other objects. Apparently, these other objects have likely been over the United States at other times. They're now just being identified.
There are new claims from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. They say that actually the U.S. has been flying high-altitude balloons over China's airspace more than 10 times since the beginning of last year. What do you make of these accusations?
Well, the Deputy Secretary of State has made clear that that's not true. So you've had at least 2 U.S. officials deny that there have been any overflights by U.S. high-altitude balloons over China. That being said, it's not unusual for nation states to fly surveillance flights over other countries. The U.S. did it back in the 60s and 70s over the Soviet Union and China using the U-2 and the SR-71. So it wouldn't be unprecedented. In the modern era, however, it's rare. What you primarily see is the use of satellites in outer space where you're not over somebody's national airspace.
Jamil, then let me ask you this. Beijing was furious after their so-called airship was destroyed, saying the United States seriously violated international practice. What do you make of that statement from China?
Well, it's completely untrue. I mean, look, international practice permits a nation state whose airspace is violated, their sovereign territory, to take action. That action can include shooting things down or bringing them down by other means. In this case, the U.S. did that within its own territorial waters. There's nothing unlawful. And in fact, the Chinese have done much more over international waters. Back in 2001, when they forced down a U.S. EP-3 surveillance plane, holding the aircrew there hostage for 10 days, and ultimately stripping that of all of its surveillance gear.
Jamil, there's curiosity growing around the world. Could this be a sign of a larger and more sinister motive to come? And why target the United States and Canada?
Well, it is possible that what's going on here is that these vehicles, these aircraft, are designed to actually collect on North American air defenses to better understand how our radar systems work, how we interact with our aircraft, and how our missiles interact with the aircraft and targets in order to identify what's going on and prepare for any future conflict that might take place.
Interesting that you say that some of these objects are being discovered above or near military sites. Many find that very suspect, while others question the pace of response to shoot them down. If at all they pose a threat to the United States or Canada. With that being said, how would you gauge the response from the United States and Canada?
Well, obviously, the first balloon was over U.S. territory for quite a while. The administration ultimately did decide to take action, but not until it was over our territorial waters. A lot of people have been critical and said that they should have taken action earlier. And now it appears that with these other objects, both the Canadians and the United States are taking action to protect their airspace and rapidly, within a day or so of identifying these objects and ascertaining whether they were threats to civil aviation or the like, have taken action against them. Primarily, it looks like what's going on here, at least in these more recent instances, is because they're at an altitude that they might interfere with commercial aircraft, they're being taken down in order to not interfere with those aircraft.
Jamil, as things stand right now, there are growing calls for the White House and defense officials to provide more information as soon as possible. Officials say we need the facts about where these objects are originating from, what their purpose is, and why their frequency is increasing. Should authorities reveal what they uncover after analyzing the facts and objects?
Well, I think at some point that authorities are going to have to reveal more information. The American public, the Canadian public, and members of Congress in the United States, members of Parliament in Canada will demand answers. So I think we're likely to see more revelations, but it does make some amount of sense for the administration and the Prime Minister's office to ascertain what's going on before making broad statements. We have seen some confusion already to date from government officials, and so the more they can clarify that, the better off everybody will be.
Jamil, officials have not publicly identified the origin or purpose of these objects. Both the United States and Canada are still working to recover the remnants, but the search in Alaska has been hampered by Arctic conditions. How important are the analyses of these remnants?
Well, to the extent you can conduct analysis, and these aircraft were taken down by Sidewinder missiles, so there were explosions, so it's unclear how much debris they'll be able to recover, particularly in the case of the Canadian object, which is now being described as a small metallic balloon. It may be that they don't get much recovery, but to the extent they do, it'll be very important to identify what's in there, what material these objects are made out of, and what surveillance capabilities, if any, they're carrying in order to better ascertain where they're from and what they're doing. Ultimately, I think what's clear here is these are not, alien or non-earthbound spacecraft. These are very much earthbound, and they're probably the Chinese or the Russians targeting the United States and Canada for intelligence collection.
Now that you've mentioned it, we'll talk about the alien issue in a little while. But let me talk about the concerns being shared worldwide. And Defense Secretary Ben Wallace says the United Kingdom would conduct a security review following the recent incidents in the United States and Canada. Should other nations be wary? And how much of a global threat is this latest development?
Well, we've certainly heard about more of these large-sized Chinese spy balloons over other parts of the world. We know that at least one has been detected over Latin America, and there are suspicions that there are more of these, that this is a global campaign of spying by the Chinese government. So I think it makes sense for allied nations, including nations that may face a threat from China, like India, to take this matter seriously, to up their air defenses and make sure that, like the U.S. NORAD has done, to open up their filters, which might have previously screened out smaller or slow-moving objects, to identify whether any of these objects are in their airspace as well.
Let's talk about NORAD and the alien issue. The head of North American Aerospace Defense Command says they would not rule out aliens or any other explanation. What say you?
Well, I think he said that in the context of saying that he was going to let the intelligence community do its work. It's been now made clear by none other than the White House press secretary from the podium that there's no evidence to suggest any alien or extraterrestrial involvement. It's fairly clear that these are earthbound objects. These are sent by likely an adversary nation to the United States. There is some outside possibility, Eric, it's worth noting, that these are just civilian devices, some of which may have gone astray. That seems less likely given the quantity and nature of these and the fact that the government decided to act against them. It is likely that these are, in fact, surveillance devices sent by a foreign government, most likely the Russians or the Chinese.
We'll have to end this conversation here. I've been talking to Jamil Jaffer. Thank you for your insights and for talking to WION today.
Thank you, Eric.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.